is a hard topic. It is something that I research on my own and speak to nationally about. I have cited every piece of information I'm sharing with you. I am simply the messenger. I am not an advocate or supporter of the information that I am sharing, but I will certainly help you take out of your application materials any bias you might have put into your materials without even knowing it. So again, this is hard information to hear. It is scholarly research I'm sharing, and I will share every citation if you want to read the hundreds of pages yourself. So thank you for inviting me to share with you, and I'm so honored to be here joining DiverseU today. At the end, if you have questions for me, we can do Q&A, or you can shoot me an email at cminnick@mso.umt.edu. You can find me through Experiential Learning and Career Success, or again through Haley. So the first thing we need to talk about, what is implicit bias? It's what we do without thinking about. It's the way we unconsciously attribute a quality to somebody or a particular social group, and it's our thoughts and feelings that we don't even really know we have about a person or a group, and it passes spontaneously through our mind without that real conscious understanding or knowledge. Anthropologically, they say it's our danger detector. Why is it important? Well, if we learn to identify the bias that we hold, whether it's implicit or explicit, which either, and how it affects our decision making, how it affects us in our own recruitment processes, if we do that and we're mindful of the risks, we can avoid those risks. Research shows if we talk about our bias and just say, you know, I caught myself crossing the street when that person walked by. Wow. If we acknowledge our bias, it actually minimizes it for us and other people. But acknowledging that is really what we tend not to do because we're a bit ashamed to say the words. If we say the words, it minimizes it though. So today what we're going to do is I'm going to just break up bias into different areas. I'm going to review all of the scholarly research that I thought was warranted sharing today. So let's start with that. I'm going to do a screen share and hopefully you'll be able to see me still. Okay, I won't be able to see all of you, but hopefully you can see this. Okay, so let's start with, it's not going forward. There we go. I'm going to start with a question. Is the human eye biased? Yes, your eyes are biased in the way in which they read a document. So does that mean that a recruiter is reading your materials in a biased way? Yes, they are. Your eye reads in a very logical format in an F shape. So what happened was these recruiters started wanting, people in the career industry started wondering, I wonder, are recruiters reading my materials in this biased way? And the way those researchers started is they started with, well, the only thing we know for sure is that a resume is the first level of recruiting, right? The resume. So are they being biased against based on content in the resume and the way in which the eye picks up that content, reads the content, and then we think about the content? Does that change our behavior when we're vetting a resume? The answer was it sure does. So in 2012, Career Ladders it was a seminal piece of research looking at how the eye actually reads a resume. It was the very, very first formal quantitative research ever on, is the eye biased against content or toward content in a resume? This research finding said yes, that our visual system is implicitly biased. We don't know, as we're reading the resumes and the material, that we are actually biased against the content. Super interesting. So what they did was they used this, the recruiters used this software. It's called iWorks tracking software, and it's like glasses with a camera in it. So this little camera analyzes how the human eye works, moves, how it interacts with content, where we read, where we gaze. This information came out of the military and came out of marketing. So if you ever notice like all the sugary snacks at the grocery store on the kids' eye level, that's this iWorks tracking software. So they took this tracking software and they put it on resumes to see if it worked. And that what the research captured was the way in which the eye reads content, what content the eye never reads, how much time and how fast we read a resume. This is the citation. If you want to read it, it is fascinating. Let's see. How many seconds? Just think. How long do you take to make a decision on a resume? And a yes or no pile. Just think. What do you think? How much time do you suppose you would take or a recruiter takes? Think. Just think. I'll tell you how much time. They found that the recruiters were taking 6.25 seconds to put a resume in a yes-no pile. All of the resumes were being read by thousands of people in the same exact F shape. So it's the F shape that marketing majors know people read in an F shape. We read left, right, halfway across the page, not quite, down a little bit on the left-hand side, over to the right, a tiny little bit, that's the middle F, and then we come back to the left side and read down, and we're done, and we go to the next thing. We do that in 6.25 seconds. In that period of time, what this research found was the recruiters were looking at and reading just a very few things. What they read was they read to your name first. So that led to the next study we'll talk about is name bias. It read your previous and current job title and where you worked, your previous job title and place where you worked, the dates. So we've got job title, company, and dates, name and education, those four things. What they found that is if you have a resume that's written in a modern style, top down, left, right, very strategically, you can actually gain a 60% greater chance of getting in the yes pile. If you use the F shape, again, you can force the eye, the human eye, to read content and to avoid content, which is what we want to do. Let's look at the researchers. They took the iWorks tracking of thousands of recruiters, the way in which the eyes work, and they made an aggregated map, a heat sensing map, and here's what it looks like. So if you look on this side, the left, is that your left? I don't know. Look on this side that doesn't have a lot of spots on it. So that's an old-fashioned style resume. Do you see the red parts? Red means I'm actually reading. Yellow means I'm scanning. Blue means my eye went over it, kind of, sort of. Look at all the red on the right. You can see the F shape. Do you see the two red dots? That is called left top loading. So we know that if you look across both documents, the red dots are in the same place. We know the human eye will read down about 2 inches over, read left to right 2 inches down. If you want someone to read something about you, you want it in that space because that's where they hit that first second. Okay, and then they move down. Notice the red is coming down, so we're over, and then notice it's coming down on the left-hand side, but then notice it comes in just a tinsy in the middle. That's the middle of the F. And then it comes down again. So I know that if I create a resume that has lines and sections and has an F shape, I can get your eye to be biased toward my resume and toward my content. Super interesting, super exciting. It shows that old school resumes no longer work. You need something at the top, a headline, you need taglines, a career summary, no more objective statements, and you need to write top, down, left, right. So that is what we call a strategically biased resume. Okay, so remember how I said one of the things they looked at was name? So now, do you suppose there's bias in name? Unfortunately, there is. Let's look at some of the studies we have. These are the two biggest studies about name bias in recruitment. Are Emily and Greg more employable? If you want to read anything, that's a very, very sad, sad article to read. But during the recruitment process, what is the recruiter looking at implicitly without knowing they have bias? Do you suppose there is bias against name? Yes or no? Shake your head. It's tremendous and it's sad. So what this first research study found is that African American sounding names received half, 50% less callback chance compared to those that had a white sounding name. So this is the study that prompted in the UK, they do name blind recruitment. It was official in 2020, the start of 2020. So all their recruitment is name blind now. We've started that a little bit at the university. I don't know if we do it for every position or not. But now this research study, very, very interesting. They sent 5,000 resumes to 1,300 jobs, same resumes, okay? They just changed the name from Emily, Greg, Lakeisha, and Jamal, okay? Emily and Greg only had to send 10 resumes per interview. How many do you suppose Lakeisha and Jamal had to send? Do you think 10? No. 15 to get one interview. Same job, same resume, name was the only thing changed. Disgusting. That's called implicit bias. And again, I don't advocate for this. I am just sharing as a messenger of this research. Okay. Now, this research was so mind-boggling. It was presented on 2020 and 2015. If you want to watch a really good show, go to 2020, go back to 2015, and look at this 1 hour special. The next study by Cotton O'Neill and Griffin, they did what was called, they called it the name game. So they reviewed 48 Russian sounding names, African American sounding names, and white sounding names. Who do you suppose got the most interviews? If you said the white sounding names, you were very, very right. All I can say about this is we all suffer when people are discriminated against based on their name. And the first step, remember what I said, the first step in addressing this is to say it out loud. To say it out loud, acknowledge it, even though it might be unintentional, and then find ways around it. So we can block out the name, we can do that, and that could help too. Or you could just say, you know, I just need to say something. I saw the name, the first thing I thought was, and I need to put that out there and move past it. Everyone else then will move past it too, because they found if you say it, you acknowledge it, other people hear it, you move past it and doesn't affect it. So those are two ways to change that. That's really the only way we can change it. There are so many women that know this, they've known it for years. J.K. Rowling, that's why she didn't put her first name. She was getting turned down so many times, she decided, screw this, I'm gonna use my initials, maybe they'll think I'm a man. So if you look, there's many, many famous authors, female authors that have done this in the past, and scientists. So that's name bias. Do you suppose there's gender bias in recruitment? Oh, I can tell you from my own experience, yes. Let's talk about gender bias in recruitment, okay? So there's quite a few more studies about this. These are probably the best ones that I found. And I can make my notes available after this if you want to look at any of the studies. Simon versus Susan, that was not very long ago, 6 years ago. That one, they gave over 1,000 HR managers the same resume, exact resume. They just changed the name from Simon to Susan for the same job, but didn't tell anyone what they did. Identical. So, female managers said Susan had 14 of 20 attributes. She was stronger. Simon didn't. Men said exactly the opposite. Simon was stronger. Susan wasn't. When they were asked which one should be invited to interview, you will not believe this. What do you think happened? The women changed direction. 62% of all of them said Simon. Same resume, same job, name change, gender change. Disgusting. Okay, let's look at this next one. So now we're like, okay, let's do a double blind study. Let's do double blind. So the National Academy of Science in 2012 did a double-blind study on gender disparity and stereotyping in US universities, thinking universities are definitely not gender biased. Absolutely not. They would totally not be. So they sent the same resume, changing the name female and male, for a lab manager position at a university. There was 127 faculty in the division that were analyzing these resumes. Again, same resume, name changed. 127 faculty. Of the faculty, half female, half male, right down the middle. Who do you think was rated more competent and hireable? Same resume. The man. If you said the man, yep, the man was related as competent and hireable. And here's the kicker, ladies, got a higher starting salary, higher than what was noted. Okay. Every single reviewer of 127 downgraded the female resume for lack of competence, for lack of hireability, downgraded her salary, and said in comparison to a man. That's pretty disgusting. And again, I am the messenger. I don't advocate. I'm just telling you the research. So they are calling this maybe not gender bias, but what they're saying this might be affinity bias. I am more likely to like someone like me. I'm like, oh, whatever you're gonna do, put a bow on it. It's bias, it's gender bias. Put the biggest bow on it, it's still gender bias. So there was another study that said that can't possibly be right. So another study in 2014 said, let's try that again at a university. Something had to be wrong with that study. So what they did is the Journal of Applied Psych, is it in there? Yeah, what happens before? So that one, they looked at letters, same letter, sent a letter to science lab managers from Brad Anderson, Keisha, Raha, Melching, and Juanita Martinez, okay? Same exact email asking just 10 minutes to join the lab where there was a lab opening. I'm not applying, I just want 10 minutes of your time to talk about the job opening that you have. Who do you think got more responses? Brad, Keisha, Rahul, Mihing, or Juanita? Brad Anderson. Brad got the most responses. And here's the worst part, is the faculty had to do an assessment before they did this. And the faculty who said they were absolutely do not hold any unconscious bias, and they are completely unbiased, and they treat women and men the same, they scored the woman worse. The ones who said they weren't scored the woman the worst and made more gender biased decisions. Okay, so the world of research said that can't be. You all have done, all three studies were wrong, no way. So in 2016, 2 years later, they looked at how maybe formatting, maybe it's the formatting, that's what it is, it's the formatting. I'm like, no, put a bow on it, same resume, no formatting. So they looked how maybe formatting might affect the recruiter. Guess what? Formatting did affect the recruiter. What they found is that recruiters appreciate and are drawn to male-styled resumes more than female-styled resumes. Cheryl, what is that? Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Okay, so what women do, we talk too much. We write too much. Men, you're like, to the point, boom, 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 done. And women put like bows and flowers all around it. So what they found is that regardless if you were a male or a female reading applications, you prefer the most concise application possible. Here's another thing. Men were more often to do a bulleted list, women paragraphs. The human eye does not like paragraphs. We saw that in that first research study. We like bullets. That was interesting. But women used more characters and more words. Women also put more personal information in their resumes. Men, not so much. So what we know from that study is no personal information unless it has something to do with the job, not dense paragraphs, more bullets, and write tight, 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 tight. Okay, so now all of this research, where did it come from? It actually came from a study way back in the dinosaur age in 1999, when they looked at curriculum vitas of tenured faculty to see who would get a promotion. So there was 230 applicants, or documents, if we will, almost half male and female, really close, 118 to 120. And all of those faculty were evaluating one resume, same name, same name. 238 faculty, one resume, same name. And they were looking at seeing who would be promoted more frequently. And they all gave the male applicants a stronger review for teaching, research, and service. Teaching, research, and service. So the men were noted as stronger on those. Women were seen as teachers and mentors and advisors. So as a woman, if you are applying in higher ed, use the words teaching, research, and service. Stay away from mentoring, advising, those words. And be a researcher, be an academician. Try to stay away from teacher, instructor, advisor. I'm very saddened by the disparate treatment, but this is part of why I was asked to present at DiverseU, is to let you all know that it's happening, but you have power and control over your own application materials. Do you think there's gender bias in recommendation letters in the way in which your professors are writing a letter of recommendation for you? There is. How sad is that, women? Not as strong for the women as for the men. Makes me sick. So there's a study that just came out September 2018. How do we describe male and female job applicants differently? So that study came out, and that showed that we use different word choices for females and men, and we put in what's called a doubt raiser for women, like she works with minimal supervision. She has the potential to be. Those are called doubt raisers. So we are looking at another study in 2017 on gender bias in academia, and it was done by University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, kind of a big school. And they looked at the linguistics within the application materials. So they looked at 4,790 recommendation letters, 4,792, and they ran them through this software called Linguistic Inquiry and Word Count. What do you think they found when they divided the letters of recommendation between male and female? Yep, the letters for the men were longer and more solid, just much more solid. The letters for the women had adjectives in them that were stereotypical. So men were successful and dominant and accomplished and able and confident, and women were nurturing and compassionate and hard workers. So one of the things we can do is, and I'll tell you a way around that when we get to the end. 14 years earlier, there was a study, and the study I just told you about, North Carolina, was replicating a study from 2003, and they looked at 300 recommendation letters dated 1990 for medical school. Do you suppose the letters of recommendation for females going to medical school were equally as powerful as those for men? No, they weren't. What they found was the letters of recommendation for women going into med school were shorter. They provide minimal assurance. I think she would be, not she will be. So minimal assurance. They were not solid recommendations. They had tremendous doubt raisers in them, and they portrayed women as students and teachers, but the men as solid researchers, academicians, and professionals. That gendered wording in those letters of recommendation shut out women from med school in 1990, just based on those letters. So this is really pitiful. It's disgusting. It hurts my feelings. But remember, what did I say? If we talk about it, we acknowledge it and talk about it, then we can make it go away. One of the things my husband has started doing, he writes about 25 letters of recommendation a semester. He runs them through the word count and makes sure that the word count is equal for men and women that he's recommending. And he has now taken out any doubt raisers and what we call grindstone words. Grindstone words is, she's hardworking. Oh, she tries. It doesn't mean you're successful, but men will be like successful. So he's done that himself. Let's look at gender bias in job postings. Do you suppose that job postings are biased implicitly toward a gender and perhaps only draw in men or only draw in women? So maybe it's not the recruiter. Maybe it's a job posting. Do you think it's a job posting? Yeah, it actually is. It is the job posting. So we also need to be self-aware about how we're writing the job posting. We want to make sure that everyone's voice is heard as we write these job postings and job descriptions. We want everyone on the team to have a voice in that. So what we tend to do is let the director, the executive director, someone will write it. More often it's a male. So males write in a male style, drawing more men. So if we're writing for an executive role, we need the female voice on that job posting too. So it's very important to have everyone look at the job posting. How many of you have been asked to look at a job posting for your area? Hey, we're going to recruit for this and that. We just want everyone's eyes on this. I haven't ever been. 20 years here. Maybe that's where we start too. So you're all much younger than me, so I'm giving this to you and asking you to do this, please. So we want to make sure that gendered wording in recruitment does not perpetuate inequality. There is research in 2011, this first one, evidence that gendered wording in job advertisement exists. That's really interesting. That showed that masculine styled job postings, wording, was less appealing to women. So a job that would be traditionally a female job will say things like support, understand, interpersonal communication. But when we're writing for a higher level role, we will use male dominated words, which are leader, competitive, dominant. Those words don't attract a female. So we can take and run it through text-to-code or gender decoding software, which is free. And it'll just tell you, you know, you really wrote this toward a female audience. You really wrote this really, really discriminatory. And here are the words that you used. And here are words that are neutral words that are better words to use. So that's text-to-code and gender decoder, both great software and free. So there was another study then after that study saying that can't possibly be. No way. So in 2014, What Works for Women at Work, they looked at that study. And what they found is that men are assumed competent in a position. Women have to prove competence over and over and over again, which diminishes their actual ability to move up or to get a position. I don't know about any of you, but your generation, this younger generation, has coined some new words. Man-terruption, that's interruption. When a woman is speaking, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I want that t-shirt, I am speaking. That happens all the time. Men on this call, do not interrupt a woman speaking. You don't do it for men, this is what research shows, but you do it for women. Please, and if someone in the room interrupts a woman speaking, why not? It's very easy to turn and say, hey, could we let her finish? And just alert the person, you are interrupting. That's called man-eruption. Something else that happens a lot is mansplaining, or a man's gonna splain something to you, and you're like, I got it, dude. Or bropriating. I actually had a colleague, a male colleague, bropriate my idea and present it at his own in a big meeting. I called him on it. I'm like, hey, dude, you and I talked about that last week. That was my idea. Do you want to throw my name in there? Did you forget my name? But we're not bropriating anything here. And it was just like the whole balloon popped. I was pretty ticked. I did keep my mom voice in check, but I was just like, I'm so tired of all this. So bropriating is where you assert a woman's idea in a meeting and present it as your own, or you let the meeting go on and then you circle back to it without calling her back in. Happens quite a lot. I heard this from actually a student last spring. I laughed and laughed. And I said, so how was your interview? She goes, you mean the mantle? And I said, the mantle. And I thought she said mantle. And I said, the mantle? She goes, yeah, the interview was just a panel of old white men, you know, a mantle. And I'm like, I didn't know that was a word. So there's all these newly coined words that women are hearing their voice and saying, look, here we're here, don't do that to us. I mean, I feel like Helen Reddy, hear me roar, hear my voice, but that was so 1970s. So here we are again. Now here's something that women do, my colleagues do, my friends do, all you women probably do on the call. Don't do this. Some men do it, not many. Don't do this. You walk into a meeting a little late and you go, I'm so sorry. A man walks into a meeting and sits down. He doesn't apologize, or it's like, hey, thanks for waiting. Do not apologize anymore. Stop saying I'm sorry. Say thank you instead. Thanks for waiting. Thank you for waiting. Instead of I'm sorry I didn't get that document to you yesterday, you say, thanks for giving me a chance to gather all the documents from yesterday. So women apologize, men do not. Women stop apologizing. This is something else women do. I challenge you to take a look at your last cover letter. This is what we do. I think I'm a strong candidate. I feel I would make great contributions to your team. So we give all these personal opinions about ourselves instead of fact. I think I'm a strong candidate. I always say to students, to female students, are you a strong candidate or not? Well, yeah, then don't say I think. I am a strong candidate. Not I feel, I think, I believe. That's opinion. It is fact. I am a strong candidate. I had a student, computer science math, double major, female, 3.89. She thinks she's a strong candidate. I'm like, child, look at what you can do. Do you see all the software you can run? Everything they want and 12 more. You are a strong candidate. We tend to pull back a bit instead of being strong because that's our culture. Our culture, we have been taught to be quiet, meek, a little bit mild, don't overplay or overrun a man. So those are things that we can stop doing. So gendered wording, what we can do too is we can form what I call a posse, an informal posse. Have someone look at your materials. Have someone challenge you on what you do to put bias in your own materials. So get a posse. Have someone who says to you, go for the job. Do it. I believe in you. So form a posse. There was a study by Hewlett Packard, and they found they were looking at gender inequality within Hewlett Packard. Really interesting study. They found inequalities in self-promotion, how we promote ourselves, that women were less likely to self-advocate, that men applied for jobs if they met 60% of the requirements, and women would not unless they met 100%. So what do we need from that information? We need to say to the women in our lives, grab our posse and say, you have 60%, go for it. Don't wait for 100%. So when they say there's more male CEOs than females, is that because of our culture, or is it because of what we do to our own selves? I think that's pretty interesting. So let's go to the next one. This one is where I digress a little bit because I think this is fascinating. Do you think there's a height bias? So I was like, I wonder. So true story. Someone said to me when President Bodnar was interviewing, and I really wasn't following it, really. I'm sorry, I wasn't. And someone said, who do you think is the strongest one for the job? And I said, I'm so sorry, I haven't followed, I haven't read their stuff. I wouldn't want to say because I've not read anything. I'm not on the search committee or anything, but based on who seems to succeed in life, the tall white guy, I don't know, right? I was just being a jokester. And then that night I thought, why did I say that? Oh, that was my own bias. Oh, awful. So I started doing research and oh my gosh, it's called the necktie syndrome. There is a bias. So if we look at CEOs, last year, 2014, only 4.2% were women. Well, maybe it's about height and not gender. So if the average male is 5.9, write that down. The average male is 5.9, but 60% of CEOs are 6 foot or taller. The average male is already out. The average CEO is 6'2". However, only 14% of American men are even over 6 foot. So let's look at our last 8 presidents. Jimmy Carter, short, 5'10". Trump, 6'2", Obama, 6'1", Bush, 6", Clinton, 6'2", Bush Sr., 6'2", Reagan, 6'1", Ford, 6". Huh, isn't that interesting? Well, look at Abraham Lincoln too. But if we do look, there is what they call the necktie syndrome, that success comes to significantly taller men. So the research study there in 2004, super interesting study. I know, I geek out on all this stuff. It found that height and salary are correlated, that men earn 2.5% more money per inch of height they are. And that each inch of height above 5'9" is worth $789 more a year. And a man who's 6 foot tall or greater will earn $166,000 more a year than someone shorter. I digress. That was just me trying to figure out why I said the tall white guy. Why did I say that? That was my own bias. And I said that. I apologized to the people in the room and I said, I'm so sorry. That was my own bias speaking. I need to shut my mouth. And we all laughed about it. And then I did some research. So what do you think about age bias? Do you think there's bias against people of a certain age? Oh, if you said yes, yes, ma'am, it is horrific out there. We have 5 generations at work today together. We got the Zoomers, we've got the Gen Y, Gen X, the baby boomers, and what they call 60 North. Those are people older than 60 that are going to have to work till 70, 75 because of the economy. So are there challenges? Yes, there's one, it's called the twofer discrimination. It's an older woman, older and woman. It's called the twofer. But the Federal Bank, the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco did a huge study looking at workers 65 plus, and they found that that group is going to grow about 29% in the next few years. And I'm like, well, yeah, no one can afford to retire. We need health benefits and stuff. And they wanted to know, is there a discrimination against them from keeping them in the workforce? So that study sent out 40,000 resumes, same resume, to 13,000 jobs. And what they found is, and then they broke the resumes into different age groups. So it was the same resume, but they just take the years of experience down a little bit each time. And what they found is the older you were with the greater experience, the less opportunity you had for the job. However, if you were a male, you had a greater opportunity for the job. So the women were less likely, if you were older, to get an interview than that same aged male, same resume. That's pretty disgusting. If you're a woman of a certain age and you're trying to promote within or secure a job, you've lost your job because of COVID, what are you going to do? Wow, you're going to try to be as young as you can. You need to euthanize your resume. There's a lot of things we need to work on. So let's do a hard stop right here. What about my picture on LinkedIn? Yeah, what about it? Do you think someone will maybe, I don't know, discriminate against you based on your picture? Oh yeah. So there was a study called Age Bias in Selection Decisions, the Role of Your Facial Appearance in 2017. So what they did was they looked at pictures of people and said, who do you think would be the better candidate for this job? Really? Just on a picture? Yep. So here's something you can do. There's a software called Photo Feeler, and you can go on and you will be part of this study, and you will be given 3 photos to evaluate for a job. Okay, and then after you do that, you submit your own picture to be evaluated. I did that. I was completely and totally incompetent, according to my picture, really likable. And oh, one other thing I wasn't. Oh, I was completely uninfluential. And I'm like, well, I think I'm more competent probably than likable, but okay. So I kept changing my picture until I got one that was a little bit better. So again, grab your posse around you, look at your picture, use Photo Feeler, and see about your own bias that you have in pictures. So there was a study in 2016, it's not on here, but it's Van Eyrich, Lavinich, and Roth and Junko. They found that HR professionals, when presented with the photos of the candidate, again, same resume, they tended to go to the white female applicants and then jump over and want to look at their Facebook page and find out a little more about them. I'm like, oh, that's so catty. So that was very interesting. So think about that. They went over to your Facebook page. There was another slide, another study, 2017, implicit age cues in resumes, and it found that if you cued your age in your resume, okay, hard stop here. If you cued your age, you were less likely to be invited to an interview. What they found was any older sounding activity got you in the no pile. Shriners, Elks, those kinds of older sounding. So maybe we don't need to tell them that you're in the Elks or the Shriners. Is this right? No. Is it fair? No. You know, I didn't make the rules. I didn't create the bias in everyone's minds. I'm just sharing the research. I got a one on here. I don't know what that means. My computer's saying 1. I don't know what that means. Anyway, so let's just try to think how we can help people with that. So what we want to do is make sure that we take off older sounding things. Okay, next question. Do you think there's religious bias in recruitment? Do you think so? Yes or no? Shake your head. If you shook your head yes, you are right. Oh my gosh, the thing won't go forward. There we go. Oh no, backwards. Okay, so there is religious bias. Okay, to yourself, what religion do you think is biased against the most? Just say it to yourself, put it in your mind, think about it. Okay, what do you think? Okay, so what do you think this study found? Just pick a religion and think that would be it. Okay, so this study sent 3,000 resumes, and they were not truthful resumes. And it was like a brand new graduate from a university in the South. And it had, are you ready for this? All the students in SIN? Every resume had participation in a student involvement. And it was religious in theme. So it said student leadership, student involvement, and then it had a religious theme to it. Okay, so here were the religious themes, okay? Atheist, pagan, Catholic, evangelical Christian, Jewish, Muslim, and a fake faith called Wellanonian. Okay, which do you think of those was most biased against? Atheist, pagan, Catholic, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Wallonian. Just think about it. Okay, I'll tell you. The resumes that expressed any religious orientation received 29% fewer response. Any. The highest discrimination was toward Muslim, pagan, and atheist equally. Who had no discrimination against them based on religion? Which faith do you think? The Jewish faith. Regardless, what we found was what? 29% of resumes queuing any religious orientation received 29% fewer responses. What does that say to you? Don't queue. So this study, that was 2014. Another study was done in France and Greece. I just found this one. Found it was almost a replicated study. Found the bias was against Muslims, and they had a 2.5% less likely chance to get an interview than an equally qualified, same resume, quote unquote, Christian. So this Greek study used Pentecostal, Evangelical, and Jehovah's Witness. They added those in. So let's try this. Do you think class cues get biased? What you might have put in your resume that kind of signals your class cue, do you think you would be biased if you cue a higher socioeconomic status than lower? Shake your head yes or no. Those shaking your head yes, yes. Does it backfire on your resume? It absolutely backfires. So this was done by the Northwestern University Kellogg School of Management. They looked on class advantages and they audited resumes to get into law school, okay? What they found is that the higher class resumes of men scored 4 times the interview rates, 4 times. What are higher class activities? It's like sailing, polo, classical music, things like, I don't have a horse to play polo. I'm not rich enough to have a sailboat. And classical music, well, we could all do classical music. But when those activities were switched with country music, track and field, and soccer, things that cost no money, the scores decreased dramatically. So now they took that same study and did that with a female name. What do you suppose happened? The women who clued higher class activities like sailing and class, they were actually discriminated against. It worked in the opposite for the women. It was like, oh my God, do we even have a chance here? Wow. So even though the education and work-related histories were equal in all these people, the higher class man got a 4 times greater callback rate. So what do we do with this? I guess we all go get a horse and learn to play polo. I don't know. We all put down sailing, but I'm not the advocate of this. I'm just the messenger of the research. Please think about what you're seeing and thinking when you read these resumes. Do you think there's a penalty against motherhood, against young women with children if they cue that they are a mother in the workforce? Shake your head yes or no. Oh, look at that. Everybody's shaking their head yes. Well, you've all read the research, haven't you? No, you already know that. So we are culturally still embedded in the traditional notion of fathers are the breadwinners, mothers are the caregivers. But let's look at what the research shows.
Hey, Fred, Cheryl, I'm sorry. We have to wrap up in like 2 minutes, sadly.
Okay, yes, moms.
Your stuff is fabulous.
Okay, do not cue about motherhood in anything. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Not on the resume. You're not on the PTA. You're not a classroom mother. You don't go to PTA. You don't have kids. Don't say a word about it. If you are unemployed, is there a bias against you? There certainly is. Do always have something on your resume that shows you're employed, you're volunteering, whatever. No longer than 6 months. Resume whitening. Do minorities scrub their resume? They do. They absolutely do. Are minorities trying to fight against discrimination? They are. 36% say they do. And it was like 98% say, oh, all my friends do. So I thought that was funny. Like 98% say everyone does, but I don't. So I thought that was interesting. So they do scrub them. They'll use initials for their name. They'll take off anything that cues that they are a minority. Hard stop there. So what do we do? How do we do this? Run job postings through Gender Decoder. Run them through text-to-code software. Make sure that your job postings are unbiased. Test your bias in the Harvard, the project Implicit. You can take that for free by Harvard. It's the IAT test. Ask everyone on your committee to look at a job posting. Ask everyone to look at the applications, not just the search committee. Make sure search committees are equally, not just man and female, but staff, director, mid-level director, student, male, female, and really showcase your true team. How else can we do that? If someone is older, take off a mailing address. We don't need a mailing address. Use Gmail, not AOL or Yahoo. Those are really old. Spay and neuter community engagement, meaning don't key that it's some old thing. Don't use an objective statement. Write tight, 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 tight. Front load, left load, top load your resume. Have a bullets of skill section. So many things you can do. In experiential learning and career success, I am training the 2 new career coaches on how to help you take the bias out of your resume and in your interviews. So there we are. Thank you. Did you learn something other than being sickened a little bit? This is the free test right there, the Harvard University's implicit association test. It's free. You can test your own implicit bias. And I thank you for your time. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day at DiverseU. I hope that we can all work together to diminish discrimination in hiring. Bye, guys.
Thank you all so much for coming. Please feel free to check out any of our other sessions going on all the rest of the day today and tomorrow. And thank you so much, Cheryl, for presenting. We appreciate you all.
Yes, we can stay on for a few minutes if people want to chat with Cheryl, or I don't know, Cheryl, if you have a few minutes.
Yeah. Anyone has any questions? And again, I am just the messenger of research. I don't advocate for this. I'm actually sickened. It sickens me. But I'm also starting research on bias in physical appearance during interviews, and I'm gathering research on that. If any of you bumble into something, please share that with me. Any questions about anything? Anyone disgusted? Saddened? Danette, I can't hear you. Are you speaking?
Danette, you're muted if you want to chat.
I said it's pretty messed up because, you know, you go through all this education, you know, do all this work just to, like, personally speaking as a woman, you go through all this education, all this awareness, and, you know, it's crazy that you're still put into a checkbox of either, you know, yes, you're going to get the job, or no, because of all these factors that have no relevance to your education or your experience to a job. It's just sickening. It's gross. It's gross. I don't like that.
Messed up. But the first thing we can do to fight it is to acknowledge it and then work against it and work as a team against it. And women, you are on search committees. You have bosses who are writing job descriptions. You go to them and you say, I believe that it is important. No, we're not going to say I believe. Take that out. It is important the entire team looks at this to make certain there is no bias in it. We want all the voices of the team heard. So there's little things we can do. You know, you're right, Danette. It is so messed up. And I'm telling you, if I was a man, a man with a master's, a doctorate, 20 years experience, 6 certifications, 14 publications, I would not be where I am if I was a man. I would be higher up.
We did have a really good question come in from Sarah. If you wanted to ask your question, and then Kit Ellington, we also have another hand.
Okay, great. I can't see your question, so ask away.
Yeah, I had 2 questions.
Okay.
First was just like so gender decoder, and then how do you spell the second one? Text-to-co?
Text-if-o. Text-if. Not like it used to be a gas station in the 70s. Not text-to-co. It is T-E-X-T-I-O.
I-O. Okay, I added a letter. Cool. I will go check this out. And then with your height thing, I was just curious if there were studies about whether taller women were similarly better paid, like relative, or if like nobody even bothered to think about that, or if height hurts women.
There's nothing on height in women that I could find. Yeah, I looked and looked.
Yeah, biases in the studies that we're doing too.
Oh yeah, just like the aspirin studies were all done on men too, not women. So might be an interesting study. I can remember being 22 in my first job, and I remember looking, I don't know why, but There was legal counsel at Washington State University was a woman there. And I remember saying to myself, well, of course she doesn't have kids. And since that date, when I was 21, I started looking at all the women who have succeeded and risen very, very high. And I'm like, she doesn't have kids, she doesn't have kids, she's not married, she doesn't have kids, she doesn't have kids. Oh, so even when I didn't know that I was looking at disparity, I was looking at disparity. And those are the things that we help you with in our office, Experiential Learning Career Success, is help you look at what's naturally you. What are you naturally doing, and tie your natural ability and your passion to a role in the world. So yeah, do a study, sir. And then there was one more question.
Yeah, I believe Kit Ellington, or I'm sorry, Eddington. It looks like you have your hand raised.
Yeah. Hey, Cheryl, thanks a lot for the presentation. Just a quick question with these studies, people, are going to often find themselves in many of these groups that have bias held against them. Is this without studies being done on this, do you think that these are typically cumulative? Do they kind of add up against a person, or is there a possibility that they might even it might be multiplication instead of addition, where these things can kind of exponentially be held against people?
It's true. They call it a twofer, where if you have inserted 2 of these biases in your own materials, you'll be twice as likely not to be invited to an interview. So a woman who cues, obviously she's a woman by name or something, and then cues she's a parent and cues she's older. Oh, you know what? Welcome to Walmart. I hope you like a blue vest, because, and no offense about Walmart, I'm just saying all this college education and it's not going to help you. So one of the things we need to really do is look at our own materials and see how we're biasing against our own selves in the world. And then have this posse of people that support you and say, you know what, you have 60% of the skills. I bet you have more and you don't even know it. Go for it. Have someone help you. And then write like a man, tight, concise. And I'm not saying you didn't write like that. I'm saying that's what the research shows. So I'm just a messenger.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Kit. Thanks for joining us. It's hard stuff, you guys, and it's super messed up. And I'll send a copy of the slides to Haley, and then Haley, you can send them out.
Awesome. And it looks like, Cheryl, do you have time for one more question?
I sure do.
Stephanie, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, Cheryl. Thank you so much for this great information.
Oh, you're welcome.
I noticed at the end of your slides, we're wrapping up quickly. You were talking about what not to put on the resume. And I noticed it read saying about omit references available on request.
Mm-hmm.
So then my thought went, okay, if we're taking that off, do we put references? Because you already talked about reference letters and how they don't sound as good as far as for females. So what do you do there?
So references available upon request, that is from the 1960s. It's really, really old. And it was back when we would do a resume and say, if you want my references, I can get them from you. So that was before references were even a thing. You just applied for a job and got it or didn't. References started becoming a thing in the 60s and the 70s, where it'd be like, yeah, but I want to talk to somebody about you. So what has happened is that people who got those jobs in the 70s are telling you, oh, you need to put that on your resume. And I'm like, no, you don't. That's so old school. References are a separate document, completely separate, and they should be provided. I know our university asks for it during the recruiting process, but truthfully, they should not be asked for until you have interviewed and they now want to recruit.
Okay.
But I use it the opposite way. I'm like, who do you know that they might know? So let's stack your references. Oh, you knew the mayor? Put that on there. You knew the governor? Put him down. Show them that before the recruitment happens, because they're going to be like, oh. So, but there are things that you don't do anymore, and that is one thing, as well as a career objective statement. Super, super old. And your physical mailing address, super old. That went off when emails came on. But what happens is older people are like, oh, here's my address. Oh, and I'll have my email. No, because they're emailing you everything. They're not mailing you anything. Goodbye, email. Lots
Great.
of changes. Yeah, thank you for the question, Stephanie.
Mhm.
Kevin, do you have any questions for me?
I don't, not at the moment.
Okay.
But and I say that because everything that you've stated, in my experience, I've seen being on different recruitment pieces with my experience at Disney and in Vegas and here. So I've seen a lot of that firsthand too. So
Yeah, it's really hard to say something to someone in the meeting in the moment about something, but it's more important to do the right thing, I think, and learn to say something in a nice way. I was on a search committee and they wanted to bring someone up from the bottom up to the top because this someone was a minority. And I'm like, well, why don't we just widen the search and bring all 6 in? Because it feels like, now I might be wrong, but it feels like you're elevating someone because of their name. So let's widen it and let the people in here have an opportunity instead of bringing someone up who scored way down here because of a name. So it does work in reverse too. But it's important to do the right thing and learn how to say things. I'm still working on that because I can just go to, you guys, that just sucks. That's wrong. I just go to that person instead of the professional person. So, but thank you so much for your time. I hope you learned at least 3 things. That's what they taught us in college. If you can learn 3 things in a classroom, you're doing good in a whole day. So
Awesome.
thank you. I'll get the
so much,
slides.
Cheryl.
You're welcome. Bye, everyone.
Cheryl.
Thank you, guys.